She was the campus beauty and a musical genius at Qing University, while I was ugly and tone-deaf. It was at the banquet celebrating Liu Ryan's victory in the violin competition that I joyfully arrived at the door of the private room, but I overheard her best friend teasing, "Who's the guy in your WeChat? The one who's always sending love emojis. His birthday is December 3rd. Liu Ryan laughed lightly. Literally, it means that. Just as I was about to push the door open, my hand froze in midair, because I drove a G-Wagon, and my birthday was December 3rd. Before I could make my hasty retreat, another voice echoed from inside the room. "I heard you have a childhood friend, and his birthday seems to be in March." Liu Ryan fell silent for a moment. Then she vaguely muttered, "He's pretty average looking, tone deaf, can't even read a musical staff. How could I possibly like him? It's always him obsessing over me." Enjoying the role of a loyal fan, I couldn't help but laugh at myself bitterly. I had been chasing Liu Ryan for 10 years, and all I earned was the title of a devoted fan. Indeed, Liu Ryan had always been the center of attention at school. She never paid attention in class, never reviewed after class, yet she aced every exam. In her free time, she would lean against the fence on the playground, looking down from above, playing a piece on the violin. And that alone could draw the admiration of countless boys. That year, Liu Ryan caused quite a stir, with her grades good enough to get into prestigious schools like Tsinghua and Peking University. But she stubbornly chose to attend a music academy. She smiled freely. Where there is genius, there lies the grand stage. And indeed, she possesses both the audacity and the capital to be bold. In just a few short years, she had already seized the gold prize in the Poseidon International Music Competition. The media hailed her as a violinist of extraordinary intelligence. In contrast, I seemed far more insignificant. My grades were average, my appearance was unremarkable, and I had no musical talent whatsoever. The only thing worth mentioning, perhaps, was that my family was relatively wealthy. I was cheerful by nature, and well-liked at school. I was even elected as the student council president. So after graduating from university, I didn't pursue further studies. Instead, I jumped straight into work. Meanwhile, it was no surprise that Liu Ryan secured a spot in the graduate program. At that time, the dormitories for graduate students had been relocated to a new building. I took a leave of absence from work to drive over and help her move. When we arrived at the dormitory, Liu Ryan stopped me just as I was about to go upstairs. "I can carry it up myself," she said. "You should head back." I was taken aback. After a long pause, I finally asked, "Do you feel that having me as your boyfriend, among your circle of musical prodigies, makes you look bad?" Liu Ryan playfully tapped my nose, exasperated. "What are you thinking? I'm just keeping my treasure hidden, so that no one else tries to steal my good man." Later on, I wanted to meet her classmates several times, but Liu Ryan always came up with various excuses to turn me down. Until this time, Liu Ryan assumed I was still abroad attending a conference, so she posted the location of their celebration banquet on her social media. Inside the private room, the conversation had already shifted to another topic. The conversation shifted to Fritz Chrysler and Menu and Max. It was a world I could hardly blend into. Just as I was about to make a quick exit, the door to the private room swung open abruptly. A man in a black suit stood there, looking me up and down with a hint of arrogance. "Who are you? Did you take a wrong turn?" The room fell silent for a moment. Liu Ryan's gaze landed on me. She seemed flustered for a brief second, but quickly regained her composure. "When did you arrive? Weren't you supposed to be in Manhattan for a conference?" I hesitated for 0.1 seconds, but in the end, I replied casually, "Just got here. Was looking for the private room." Even I couldn't explain my own actions. Maybe it was the instinct of being a business director. Always leave a little room for maneuver. Never reveal your final card too easily. Or perhaps I was just trying to deceive myself. As long as I didn't expose the truth, there was still room to backtrack. Ruyan smiled and introduced me to the group. This is He Kong. Yes, he's my friend. Friend. Chewed on those words, a bitter taste spreading at the back of my tongue. The atmosphere in the room became a little awkward. Everyone's eyes fell on my car keys. Their expressions shifted to one of realization. But it didn't take long before the man in the black suit shattered the uneasy silence. Ha ha! He Kong! This puppy name suits you well. I hadn't even had a chance to react. Ruyan had already quietly stepped between us. Feng Yuan, you always so talkative. Chattering away with that little mouth of yours. Hurry up and go eat something. On the surface, it seemed like she was stopping him. But her words conveyed affection and care. Feng Yuan stuck out his tongue at Ruyan in a rather cute manner, then ran off to nibble on the fruit platter. Feng Yuan. That name was not unfamiliar to me. In the past 6 months, Ruyan often mentioned him. She said a returning overseas piano prodigy had joined the school, a man named Feng Yuan. In terms of musical sense and talent, he was in no way inferior to her. He was now the favorite of the professors. She half-jokingly, half-sincerely complained, "I feel like I've lost my charm." Though she complained, I could always sense the mutual admiration in her words, as if she cherished the competition. At this moment, one of Ruyan's classmates called me to sit down and casually made a joke. "Ruyan, you have such an honest, good friend. Why don't you introduce him to us? If you don't want him, just let him out on the market." Ruyan's face instantly darkened. Without much of a warning, she spat out a word. "Get lost." The entire room fell into an awkward silence. Just as I was about to ease the tension, Feng Yuan suddenly let out an exclamation. Ruyan quickly turned around. There she saw Feng Yuan holding something in one hand, and with the other, he had managed to slice his skin. A slight cut, just breaking the skin. Ruyan immediately panicked. "I've told you, your hands are for playing the piano. Whenever you want to eat something, aren't I the one who always peels it for you?" Feng Yuan put on a face full of fake grievance. "Why are you being so fierce?" "I was just worried about strong brother getting angry." As he spoke, Feng Yuan's eyes quickly turned red. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he tried to hold back his emotions, putting on the look of a lovesick male lead. Ruyan suddenly lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes held an undisguised reproach. But I hadn't done anything at all. Why, just because he said a few words? Did you automatically assume I'm the villain? Favoritism can be blatant, but how could you just turn a blind eye to right and wrong? Just then, Ruyan seemed frantic, like an ant on a hot pan. Her eyes were filled with panic. "I'll take you to the hospital." As she passed by me, Feng Yuan's legs, which had been dangling weakly, suddenly moved. One of his feet nearly kicked me in the face. I instinctively leaned back to dodge, but to my surprise, there was a chair directly behind me. Caught off guard, I stumbled and fell, letting out a soft gasp from the pain. Ruyan paused in her tracks. She was about to check on me, when Feng Yuan said with a pitiful tone, "I'm sorry, strong brother. I didn't mean to. It's just that my hand hurts so much. I'm so scared I might not be able to play the piano anymore." Ruyan furrowed her brows and gently comforted him. "Don't be scared. I'll take you to the hospital right now. He fell by himself. It's not your fault. It's all his own carelessness." As she spoke, she walked away without even looking back. The room fell into a silence so thick it seemed to freeze. After a long pause, one of Ruyan's classmates spoke hesitantly. Brother. She's not. There was a pause, and it seemed they had nothing more to say. Finally, they asked if I wanted to be taken to the hospital. I shook my head and refused. I limped away towards the underground garage. After graduating from university, I worked myself to the bone, making money. In less than 3 years, I climbed to the position of business director. I always had to be first in everything, trying to outdo everyone around me. I bought a nice house, drove a good car, and was always eager for the new, quick to discard the old. I pursued the expensive and rejected the cheap. But the one thing I never gave up was my attachment to Ruyan. When I was young, my parents got divorced, each of them forming a new family. Neither of them wanted me. I was tossed around like a game of kickball. If I wanted living expenses, I had to endure mockery and cold glares. At that time, the only comfort was Ruyan. She would gently play the violin when I hid downstairs crying, and would share her breakfast of buns and milk with me. When people at school called me an unwanted, wild child, she would firmly shield me behind her. I had lacked love since I was little, and she was the only source of warmth. That's why, after all these years, I couldn't bear to let go. Suddenly, a sharp and frivolous whistle cut through my memories. Before I knew it, I had already arrived at the empty underground garage. A group of women, all dressed in extravagant and colorful attire, were walking towards me. The other party had already started moving in my direction. I instinctively took a step back. In a rush, I reached for my car keys. In my panic, the car keys slipped from my hand and fell to the ground. Just as I bent down to pick them up, a delicate, snow-white hand suddenly appeared. It quickly grabbed the keys before I could. Another hand lightly rested on my shoulder. I told you to wait for me. Why did you come down by yourself again? I looked up. It was an unfamiliar face. She appeared to be no more than 20 years old. She was dressed simply in a t-shirt and jeans, but on her wrist was an XL-sized Vacheron Constantine watch. One of those that money can't easily buy. Apart from that, she wore no other accessories. The other women stepped back, muttering curses. The young woman casually opened my car door. "Get in. It's cold outside." As she said this, she sat down in the driver's seat. She casually took out her phone and sent a message before starting the car. Only when the car was driving down a brightly lit street did she finally speak. "Emergency calls for special treatment. Sorry. I hope I didn't overstep. Don't worry. I'm not a bad person. I'll take you home." I forced a smile. "I know. That watch of yours. It's even more expensive than my car. Thanks again for earlier." The woman, following my instructions, turned the car onto the ring road. She thoughtfully stayed silent. She let me close my eyes and rest. Before long, we arrived home. I felt a bit embarrassed and said, "How are you getting home? Should I arrange a car for you?" The woman smiled. "No need. My assistant will pick me up. The car has been following us the whole time." I looked up. A black Bentley was parked right beside her. A person who looked like an assistant handed her a bag. "Ms. Bai, here's the thing you wanted." The woman took it and handed it to me. "Your knee is scraped. I bought some medicine and bandages for you. But if it's serious, it's better to go to the hospital." It was only then that I realized I had scraped my knee when I fell earlier. A dull pain lingered. The woman turned and opened the car door. "Better get back soon. You're seriously injured. Or you could have your girlfriend pick you up." I couldn't help but force out an awkward smile. My girlfriend is really busy. Seeing the woman getting into the car, I hurriedly thanked her again. "Thanks for tonight." The woman looked up at me, smiling slyly. "You're welcome, Mr. He." After saying that, the car sped off, leaving me standing there in shock. How did she know my last name is He? Based on my experience, after an argument with Ruyan, we usually have a few days of Cold War. When I can't stand it and initiate peace, she would always respond with 3 cold questions. "Do you know what you did wrong? Where did you go wrong? Will you make the same mistake again?" But for some reason, this time after the argument, I didn't feel the usual urge to check my phone every now and then, nor did I feel the need to contact her first, but I never expected that. This time, it was Liu Ruyan who initiated the apology. It all started with a viral video. While I was in Manhattan for a meeting, I purposely visited the famous Kolstein music shop. I wanted to pick out a fine violin for Liu Ruyan as a gift for her. Little did I know, while I was choosing the violin, I happened to catch the live stream of a popular Chinese influencer visiting the store. He eagerly interviewed me. "You're buying such an expensive violin. You must be an amazing musician. Could you play a song for us?" I smiled calmly and said, "I'm tone deaf. This violin is for my girlfriend. She's incredibly talented." After the clip went viral, viewers flooded the comments section. "I envy his girlfriend so much. A 300,000 yuan violin, and he gifted it without batting an eye. The guy is so handsome. When he talks about his girlfriend, his eyes light up. When do you plan to change girlfriends? Can I get in line for that? Let me queue up first." With all this attention, Liu Ruyan finally pieced together the truth. After my meeting in Manhattan, I raced against time to buy the violin for her. Then I rushed back without stopping for rest. I didn't even adjust to the time zone. I didn't have time to change clothes. I couldn't wait to see her. But it turned into a joke instead. Liu Ruyan couldn't take it anymore. She sent me a message on WeChat. "Are you there? Let's have dinner tonight." The cold goddess even brought a hint of condescension in her peace offering. But still, I weakly replied, "Okay." I originally thought it would be a romantic candlelight dinner for just the two of us. But it turned out to be a wild party with a group of people. Liu Ruyan took me to a bar. Fang Yuan spotted us immediately. He waved at Liu Ruyan. "Over here." Liu Ruyan smiled and pulled me over. Completely oblivious to the fact that my mood had shifted from sunny to cloudy. After several rounds of drinks, Liu Ruyan got up to go to the restroom. Just then, someone brought up the topic. "Wow," giving me a thumbs up. "Impressive. 300,000. That's the most expensive violin in the whole school." Before I could say anything, Fang Yuan sneered and said, "Spending money on a woman? What's so impressive about that?" The old masters always said, money is for showing to women, not for spending on them. If a woman is willing to spend money on you, that's true love. As he spoke, he casually adjusted his wrist, a Kunkin watch shining boldly there. Fang Yuan leaned in slightly and whispered, "Liu Ruyan gave this to me." "What has she given you?" "She has to write your birthday in the notes just to remember it. Let alone gifts. It's the ones who aren't loved that are the third party." I smiled faintly. My fingers absent-mindedly traced circles on the rim of my glass. Kunkin Watch 2019 edition. Hardly worthy of attention. It must have been on a huge discount, but from what I knew about Liu Ruyan, she wasn't exactly well off. Where would she get the money to buy Fang Yuan a watch? It seemed like Fang Yuan was getting irritated. Liu Ruyan and I were a perfect match. A match made in heaven. The first time I saw her, I knew I had to have her. I saw Liu Ruyan walking out of the restroom from a distance. She was wearing a pink hoodie, black casual pants, and her well-maintained skin and hands. Her simple accessories seemed insignificant next to her breathtaking beauty. Every inch of her skin radiated the glow of natural beauty. Indeed, she had a massive allure in our youthful campus. I shook my glass. "Little brother, you're not in love with Liu Ruyan. You're in love with the persona I've created by spending money." Unfortunately, he didn't understand my kind advice. Instead, a trace of malice flickered in his eyes. He suddenly grabbed my hand and my glass, poured a drink down his throat, and immediately started coughing. With tears in his eyes, he cried out to the approaching Liu Ruyan, "I can't drink. My brother made me drink. I didn't want to drink. He forced me." His acting was so poor. It was like a large-scale monkey show. Yet there were still people willing to play along. Without a second thought, Ruyan reached out and pushed me away. "Are you done?" He Kong thankfully Fang you and suggested I bring you to the bar to relax. Can he be compared to you? He's still a little boy. How can he drink? I suddenly grabbed her hand that was pushing me and looked at her wrist, which was now empty. With every word I asked, "Where's the couple's diamond? Ring I gave you?" Ruyan instantly fell silent. She pulled her hand back, her expression displeased. There was an almost imperceptible hint of aggression in her manner. "Once I give it to you, it's yours. Why are you asking so many questions?" As she spoke, her eyes unconsciously shifted to Fang Yuan's Kunkin watch. I was almost enraged to the point of laughing. "You sold the diamond ring I gave you, and used the money to spoil some little boy. Your hands, which should be playing the violin, are being wasted. They should be used to play the abacus beads instead." My voice wasn't quiet. People around us started looking over. A few of Ruyan's classmates stood there, mouths agape. They stared at her blankly, seemingly unable to believe that the usually elegant and noble princess was actually a pawn in a game. The truth is, I didn't care much about the money. What mattered to me was the significance of that diamond ring. My relationship with Ruyan began when I confessed first. From the beginning, she always had an indifferent attitude, accepting whatever came her way. It was fine if we stayed together. It was fine if we broke up. It wouldn't matter if she was with someone else. Until one time, it was my birthday, and Ruyan happened to be out of town for a performance. I spent my day in gloom, buying a cake and blowing out the candles alone. Just as the clock struck midnight, a soft violin melody suddenly floated in from outside the window. I stuck my head out, disbelieving. Ruyan was downstairs, still in her slightly wrinkled performance clothes. She tilted her head back, with a hint of smugness in her eyes, as if pleased by my surprise. Ruyan had always been aloof, but that was one of the few times she showed a touch of childishness. It pierced my heart just like that. Later, we shared the whole cake together. She nuzzled into my neck, feeling a bit aggrieved. I rushed back after the performance. I even took a donkey cart, just to be back in time for your birthday. Ruyan told me. That night's violin piece was one she composed herself. It was called Shengzhuang. After sending Ruyan off, I happily twirled around a few times in the room. I thought maybe Ruyan really had feelings for me. The next day, I used my project bonus to buy a pair of coupled diamond rings. When Ruyan took them, she seemed a bit surprised. "It's not even a special occasion. Why suddenly such an expensive gift?" I grinned and took her hand, the two diamond rings shining brightly on our hands. "You don't understand. The scene from that time was vivid in my mind, but it could never be relived." Seeing the strange looks from the people around her, mixed with a hint of disdain, Ruyan finally couldn't take it anymore. "Enough! I'll return the money to you. We're breaking up." The day after we broke up, Ruyan got together with Fang Yuan. Their official announcement was grand. They even filmed a VCR and posted it on Weibo. In the video, one of them was playing the piano, and the other was playing the violin. As the notes jumped in the air, they often exchanged smiles. Their eyes shared an unspoken understanding. Fans flooded in with blessings. "Wow, two musical geniuses are together. Best wishes. Will their children be able to pass the piano level 8 exam as soon as they're born?" Even the media joined in the excitement. A perfect match. High mountains and flowing water meet a true friend. I smiled faintly. I left a comment below. "Respect and best wishes, but perhaps you could return the money first." There was still no reply. Soon, the comment was deleted. "Fine, fine, fine. That's how you want to play it." Just as I was rolling up my sleeves and preparing to confront the situation, a strange phone call suddenly came in. "Hello? Is this instant noodles?" I irritably. "No, I'm a boiled egg." I hung up after saying that. The world has gone mad. There are hardly any normal people left. Who would have thought that? Just a few minutes later, a message suddenly popped up on WeChat. Mr. He, I'm the HR you spoke with earlier. You mentioned you'd consider our company? Our CEO just tried to contact you. You might. Well, I'm a bit hungry. Anyway, would it be convenient for you to do an interview? I stared at the HR's seemingly meaningless, yet actually quite meaningful ellipsis, and fell into deep thought. Should I still go for this? After hesitating for a while, I decided, despite the potential embarrassment, to go ahead with the interview. I answered the call. Two familiar faces appeared on the screen. One was the HR I had been in contact with, and the other was the woman who had helped me out in the parking lot. The HR introduced her as the company's CEO, Bai Ningbing. A brief moment of confusion, but soon after, I quickly regained my composure. CEO! Such a coincidence. I haven't properly thanked you for what happened earlier. Bai Ningbing was dressed in a well-tailored suit today, her expression serious as she nodded. You're welcome. Let's start the interview then. I nodded in agreement. At the same time, I realized. Number wonder Bai Ningbing knew my last name. That day, she must have already had my resume, and she probably saw my photo. In reality, the interview was just a formality. This company was a subsidiary of a large group, which had just entered city this year. They were in the process of forming a team. Coincidentally, I had previously worked with the group's CEO. They had extended an olive branch to me quite early on. The benefits were 3 times better than my current job, and there was greater room for growth. The only issue was that the subsidiary had a newly appointed CEO and a lead who had just returned from abroad, so we needed to see if we could get along with each other. Fortunately, Bai Ningbing was a leader with a good sense of boundaries. She knew what the company needed for growth, but she didn't interfere excessively in my field of expertise. In the end, we reached a mutual understanding. Bai Ningbing's sharp eyes held the authority of someone in power. Welcome aboard. I was stunned for a moment, feeling like she might be a bit unwell. But considering the job, I shouldn't have such high expectations. After all, I had endured Liu Ruyan for so many years, let alone a malfunctioning ATM machine that spits out money. After agreeing on the start date, everyone politely said their goodbyes and logged off. But my phone froze for a moment, and I couldn't exit the screen. As I frantically pressed the phone, I witnessed a shocking scene. Bai Ningbing, with her confident, mature aura, began adjusting her tie. Then she suddenly jumped 3 feet in the air. She answered. It was worth it for me to change into a suit to highlight my professionalism as CEO. My pupils dilated. No! Who wears a suit on top and a little skirt underneath? I couldn't believe it. And she wore just a little skirt under the suit? After struggling to restart my phone, I was bombarded with a desperate message from HR. Well, I'm ... Nearsighted? No other intentions. Our company has just established an eye care subsidy. If you're nearsighted, you can get free glasses every year. Wait ... Why you turn your phone off? Let me explain ... I was just so happy, like a 200-pound child, and isn't very familiar with the meeting system. But we are a legitimate company. I struggled to hold in my laughter and replied, Thank you. I'm not nearsighted. My vision is 5.0 in both eyes. A month later, I completed my resignation procedures and joined the new company. The first project was quite challenging. The client, Mrs. Shen, was someone I had worked with before. She was a difficult and troublesome person. She had a plump figure. She was wearing a tight leopard print bodysuit, which accentuated every bit of excess fat on her body. It made her seem a bit greasy. At the dinner table, she downed a whole bottle and began telling crude and inappropriate jokes. Bai Ningbing and I exchanged a few glances, both of us feeling a bit fed up. Mrs. Shen, fueled by the alcohol, reached for my hand. Mr. He, I really admire you. You look so honest. And you're a good person. Just then, Bai Ningbing calmly spoke. Mr. He, could you open the door? It's a bit stuffy in here. At the same time, she subtly blocked Mrs. Shen's inappropriate hand. I stood up to open the door, only to unexpectedly spot Liu Ruyan and Fang Yuan. It seemed like they had just finished arguing. They were walking a few steps apart, maintaining a 2-meter distance. Neither made eye contact, nor spoke. Originally, I didn't want to say anything, but then Liu Ruyan looked up and saw me. Her voice revealed a hint of surprise. He Kong, what are you doing here? Fang Yuan, behind her, lifted his head at the sound, and his gaze toward me was filled with resentment. Liu Ruyan took a few steps forward, seemingly wanting to say something more to me. But Mrs. Shen, swaying from side to side, came stumbling over, struggling to open her eyes. She looked at Liu Ruyan. Oh, I know you. You're the little canary mister he used to keep, right? He would always buy you this and that. She sneered. Liu Ruyan, her pride wounded, her eyes nearly shooting fire. I'm a violinist. I'm not a canary. I vaguely felt that things were about to go wrong, but I never expected it to go to a whole new level of disaster. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Shen nodded, and then gave a big thumbs up. I get it. You're performing for money, huh? The scene that day became chaotic. Liu Ruyan, in a fit of rage, immediately jumped on Mrs. Shen and started beating her. Fang Yuan played the role of an atmosphere builder, yelling loudly. In the midst of the chaos, Bai Ningbing blocked an attack that was coming through the crowd. I watched the woman who stood unhesitatingly in front of me, and just as I was about to feel moved, I heard a loud bang. Unfortunately, poor Bai Ningbing was hit by a bottle. She now had a purple bruise on her temple. I hurriedly supported her, leaning in to check on her forehead. To my surprise, Bai Ningbing stared at me with wide eyes, her gaze holding for 3 seconds. Then, a hot stream suddenly ran down my cheek. I froze, touching the red liquid on my face. This fool had a nosebleed. Across from me, Bai Ningbing was holding her nose, her face as red as a tomato. Yeah. Okay. The scene became even more chaotic. It wasn't until the driver arrived that the melee finally ended. After Mrs. Shen sobered up, she called the police. The police arrived, learned the situation, and confirmed that Liu Ruyan had struck first. They then asked Mrs. Shen, "Do you accept mediation?" Mrs. Shen, holding her stomach, cursed. "Mediation, my foot. You little. I'll make sure she gets locked up." At this point, Liu Ruyan, belatedly realizing what had happened, started to panic. He Kong, I was busy asking the waiter for a towel to help Bai Ningbing cool her forehead. I didn't pay any attention to her. What? Did this not drip into your mouth? You know how to throw it away after causing trouble. Now you're yelling? The police officer looked at me with confusion and asked, "What is your relationship with each other?" Upon hearing this, Liu Ruyan stared at me intensely. I smiled faintly, remaining calm and collected. Ex-girlfriend. She's pretty much like an enemy now. Liu Ruyan tightened her hand, her knuckles cracking as she clenched her fists. In the past, Liu Ruyan had also been impulsive in arguments, and I helped her settle them. She seemed to think that wasn't too hard, just a matter of apologizing and maybe paying a little compensation. But now, why should I take care of her? Adults need to be responsible for their actions. Since Mrs. Shen refused mediation, and with the other party's legal team stepping in, Liu Ruyan could very likely face a prison sentence. It wasn't until Liu Ruyan's parents arrived. Both had been teachers all their lives and had never bent their backs for anyone but for their daughter. They finally compromised. Their faces were full of exhaustion and sorrow as they bowed and apologized to Mrs. Shen. For the first time, Liu Ruyan's father lost his temper. He slapped Liu Ruyan across the face, then pressed down on her neck, forcing her to apologize. Liu Ruyan's eyes were bloodshot, and it took a long while before she could barely utter, "I'm sorry." In the end, Mrs. Shen accepted the money that Liu Ruyan's parents had scraped together, and the matter was settled. Liu Ruyan's school finally took her talent into account. They didn't expel her. She was given a serious demerit, and the entire school was notified and criticized. Fan Yuan, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. He claimed he was sick and had been resting at home. Only when everything was settled did he return to school and pretend to comfort Liu Ruyan. He even posted a Weibo about showing affection. "I regret not being by your side when you were going through the hardest time. It's okay. From now on, I won't miss any important moments." In the picture, Liu Ruyan was held by him, quiet as a chicken, her expression even appearing numb. During lunch break, while I was munching on a sandwich, I saw the post and nearly burst out laughing. I was laughing so hard that the office ceiling almost flew off. A moment later, the office door cracked open slightly. Bai Ningbing's head squeezed in. "Do you need a lunch, buddy?" I stared at her, completely confused. Before I could say anything, she had already walked in confidently, sitting down across from me with 2 huge lunch boxes in hand. I gave her a thumbs up. "Miss Bai, you really can eat. Impressive." Bai Ningbing was stunned for a moment. After a while, she sighed and said, "You're still as silly as you were when you were a kid." I furrowed my brow and looked at her, puzzled. Bai Ningbing seemed a bit disappointed as she lowered her head. "Do you remember the outsider in our yard when we were kids?" I was startled. "Her? The mute girl? How did you know she could talk?" "A medical miracle." Bai Ningbing held back her laughter, just barely stopping herself from slapping the lunchbox on my head. "I wasn't mute. When we were kids, the children in the neighborhood tended to form cliques and were exclusionary. One day, a family moved in. It was a couple with a girl who was 2 or 3 years younger than us. I heard they had just returned from abroad to handle family matters. Naturally, the girl became the target of bullying. Soon, we noticed that no matter what she did, the girl never spoke. So we guessed that she was mute, and we escalated the bullying even more. At that time, because my parents had divorced, I was considered an outsider in the neighborhood. Apart from Liu Ruyan, no one wanted to play with me. They even used to prank me. At first, I was glad that the girl was there, because ever since she arrived, I was bullied less often. Once, someone even invited me to join them in pranking her. They had already discovered that she was terrified of moths. So everyone caught about 10 huge moths. The largest one was almost the size of a child's palm. Taking advantage of the adults being absent, the group quietly ran to her window. They threw the bag filled with moths inside. Then they held the window shut. In an instant, the terrified screams filled the room. Everyone burst out laughing. A mute girl will scream too. I didn't participate that day. I was just at home, talking on the phone with Liu Ruyan, who had gone to a summer camp. When I heard the noise, I rushed downstairs. The children had already run off. Low sobs and the sound of wings fluttering faintly filled the room. Taking advantage of my small size, I managed to squeeze through the window. The room was filled with moths, making the sight enough to make your skin crawl. In the corner, the girl was curled up, hugging her knees and sobbing. A large moth was resting on the tip of her nose. "Help me ... Also terrified, but remembering how I used to be bullied, I finally gathered the courage to approach and try to shoo the moth away. But I ended up with the moth flapping into my face. It was so intense that I fainted from the shock. That night, I even had a high fever. The doctor said it was due to excessive shock. When I finally recovered, the mute girl and her family had already moved away. As I grew older, this incident was almost forgotten by me. Who would have thought that the poor girl from back then would turn into my boss today? Bai Ningbing said that when I fainted on the floor, she was completely stunned, and I, despite everything, was still struggling to comfort her. Don't be scared, mute sister. It's just a moth. I'll protect you. We locked eyes, and after a long silence, I nervously spoke. To be honest, I've already dug a house with my toes, one with a basement and an attic. Who gave me the courage when I was a kid? Bai Ningbing laughed at my words, but she still thanked me. Back then, I had autism and hardly spoke. When I saw you faint, I was afraid something would happen to you. That's why I called someone to come help. When my parents heard me speak, they almost cried tears of joy. Later, they took me abroad. When I tried to find you again, I couldn't get in touch until ... Back to the country for this job. I received the resume for the vice president of business position from the head office. A familiar name, and the photo had the same familiar brows and eyes. Finally, I knew for sure. I was the boy from back then, the one who made an impression. After a moment, Bai Ningbing pushed a lunchbox toward me. Here, I brought this for you. I've noticed you've been eating sandwiches and black coffee every lunch. That's not good for your stomach. Try my cooking. Inside the lunchbox were beautifully cooked beef with bell peppers, spinach noodles, and 3 peeled large shrimp. Bai Ningbing even thoughtfully placed blueberries and strawberries next to the rice for dessert. I wasn't stupid, but I didn't know how to respond to her, so I just ate quickly. Bai Ningbing sat across from me, waiting leisurely. When I finished eating, she naturally reached for the lunchbox to clean it. I quickly covered the empty lunchbox. No, I can't let you do that. I'll do it myself. Bai Ningbing suddenly smiled at me. It's fine. You don't need to rush. You're such a good man. You deserve to enjoy the process of being loved. In that moment, I was stunned, and she took the empty lunchbox from my hands. She smiled like a mischievous cat who had stolen a fish. Then she walked confidently to the sink to wash the dishes. At that moment, my phone suddenly vibrated. A WeChat message popped up. It was from Liu Ruyan. She had transferred 0.01 yuan to me. I couldn't help but twitch my mouth. It seemed like she was testing if I had deleted her, but it probably backfired on her. Maybe Liu Ruyan knew she had made a mistake, so she decided to get straight to the point. You didn't delete me. Does that mean you still can't let go of me? I was speechless. Listen, sister. First of all, you promised to return the money and haven't done so. Secondly, work is exhausting. I really need some entertainment to lighten up. That was the truth. Previously, Fang Yuan added me on WeChat to show off. Over this period, I watched them post their love life on WeChat. It was very relieving to see their guests the drawing posts. Usually, it was Fang Yuan posting on his moments. Wow, I really like this watch. Can you help me pick out some sneakers? My girlfriend promised to get me these for my birthday. Which one looks better? Then Liu Ruyan would reply beneath, baby, if you like it, just buy it. Soon, Fang Yuan would be happily receiving what he wanted. Meanwhile, Liu Ruyan's moments seemed to have significantly fewer posts about meals, concerts, or similar activities. After replying to Liu Ruyan, I went to a meeting. It wasn't until 3 hours later that the meeting ended, and I had the time to check my phone. Liu Ruyan had already sent dozens of WeChat messages, all of them complaining. She said that Fang Yuan didn't understand her and often made unreasonable scenes. Every time she wanted to practice the violin, he wouldn't let Liu Ruyan disturb him. But when Liu Ruyan wanted to practice the piano, Fang Yuan would act spoiled and ask her to accompany him for shopping. If she didn't go, Fang Yuan would get angry and argue. Occasionally, Fang Yuan would even compare himself to me, asking Liu Ruyan to take him to the private restaurant where we used to have our dates. Liu Ruyan would suppress her impatience and tell him, those restaurants only accept members. Without me, she couldn't get in either. Fang Yuan wouldn't listen at all. If one of my ex-boyfriends had something, I had to have it too. Unbeknownst to him, When I was with Liu Ryan, I paid for almost all of our expenses. Also, she actually knew. When she got arrested by the police, Fang Yuan was just scared and didn't want to face it with her. She mocked herself. If she had really gone in at that time, Fang Yuan would definitely be the first to distance himself. After the WeChat conversation, Liu Ryan was the first to lower her head and show weakness. I regret it. Hey Kong, can we start over? The piano you bought me back then, you still haven't given it to me. Let me play you another piece, a grand performance. I was deeply moved, but then I scared myself and deleted her. Whether or not she returned the money didn't matter. With the time spent tangled with her, I could have earned 10 times that money. And she probably didn't know. The piano she brought back had long been listed on a second-hand website for sale. The money from the sale was used to buy 3 pairs of Nike sneakers, 2 suits, and a bracelet. It turns out spending money on myself still feels the best. Since I deleted Liu Ryan, the company seemed to be on a roll, signing contracts effortlessly. In that month, the turnover exceeded 100 million. To this, Zining Bing cleverly said, "Look, she blocked your financial luck. If it were me, I wouldn't dare to want such a woman." I humbly asked, "Then what kind of man do you like? Please tell me in detail." Zining Bing spat out a mouthful of tea. "It's not that I meant it. Recently, Zining Bing brought me lunch every day and claimed that the culture of sharing meals with others is a fine tradition in our country, which must be promoted. It would be a lie to say I wasn't moved. When I was with Liu Ryan, I felt very tense, and also a subtle sense of inferiority. But when I'm with Zining Bing, I feel unusually relaxed, sometimes even without talking. Just sitting together and handling our own work, we wouldn't feel awkward. Most of the time, she makes me feel as if I'm bathed in the warmth of spring. But occasionally, she also shows a bit of childishness in front of me. Like now, for example. I stared in shock at Zining Bing and the shining Cerna in her hands. Is this the surprise you were talking about? Zining Bing proudly lifted her head. You like musicians, don't you? I can be one too. I've been learning for a long time. Now I'm really good. As she said that, she fixed her hairstyle and placed the Cerna to her lips. She took a deep breath and then aloud, high-pitched, "Father and mother, my dear," echoed throughout the entire room. I was numb, shocked. I was at a loss. She was excited, proud, growing more and more confident with each passing moment. As the song ended, she looked at me expectantly. How was it? Did it sound good? I couldn't bear to hurt her fragile little heart, so I nodded earnestly. It was like the sound of heaven. Just as Bai Ning Bing was excited, looking like she was about to perform another piece, there was a knock at the door. I opened it wide. Liu Ryan stood at the door, looking exhausted. When she saw me, her eyes brightened. "He Kong, I finally found you." Before I could say anything, a head from behind rested on my shoulder and had the audacity to nuzzle against me. "Baby, who is it?" I looked at Bai Ning Bing speechlessly. "You're just afraid that she won't be mad enough, aren't you?" The other party innocently blinked at me. Hey ha! I completely lost my temper and could only coldly say to Liu Ryan, whose eyes were blazing, "What is it?" Liu Ryan answered without addressing my question. "Why is she here?" Bai Ning Bing quickly shoved me aside, eagerly jumping in to answer. "I came to cook for my baby." Liu Ryan clenched her fists, veins popping on her forehead. In the next second, Bai Ning Bing sneered, looking down from above with contempt, trying to act like an adult. "Little brat. People without ability are the ones who resort to throwing punches. Do you dare to lay a hand on me? I'll definitely send you in." As she spoke, she leaned against the doorframe, slightly bending forward to stare at Liu Ryan. "I mean what I say." Bai Ning Bing shed the childish and gentle demeanor she had with me. At her core, she remained the decisive CEO, cutting through the world of fame and fortune. It was at this moment that I finally realized the mute sister who used to be introverted, who never spoke and feared moths, had finally, over the long years, nearly cruelly healed herself. If she could, then am I no longer the unloved child from my youth? The ones who lack love, why shouldn't they be able to love themselves? Ruyan's eyes shimmered with tears, and she looked at me pleadingly. He Kong, please, give me another chance. The orchestra has sent me an invitation, promising me the position of principal. I will become even better than her. Come back to me, please. I studied Ruyan carefully in front of me. She didn't seem to be doing well. Her clothes were wrinkled. I suppose Fang Yuan hadn't helped her iron them. She couldn't do it herself either. Her once delicate skin was now oily. Without me paying for her skincare, she no longer resembled that noble princess. After a long pause, I finally smiled. Ruyan, do you think I'll always be that little boy who can't live without you? I once accepted your coldness, thinking that one day you'd warm up. But when I realized that deep down, you had turned into a terrible person, what else is there for me to hold on to? Grow up. I've already given you up. I can accept all the sunk costs. You know I will never turn back. The next time I saw Ruyan's news, it was on the television in a cafe. That day, I was having afternoon tea with Bai Ningbing. Suddenly, the television broadcasted a piece of news. The genius violinist was injured. Her boyfriend was arrested for assault. It turned out that during the banquet when Ruyan joined the orchestra, he had performed a piece, grand performance. As everyone applauded and cheered, Fang Yuan suddenly ran out with a weapon and stabbed Ruyan's finger. When Fang Yuan was caught by the police, he smiled and said to Ruyan, whose face had turned pale, "Do you remember what I said? You can't be better than me. Since I didn't become the principal, you certainly can't either." It was only later that I learned it. Fang Yuan had an extremely strong sense of jealousy. He was already dissatisfied with Ruyan still having lingering feelings for me, and when she was invited to become the principal. But he wasn't. His intense jealousy made him decide to destroy Ruyan. The doctor who treated Ruyan said with some regret, "You won't be able to play the violin anymore." Actually, the boy wasn't very strong. If you had been wearing a ring or something to block it, it would have been fine. I can see the marks from wearing a ring on your finger all the time. Why wasn't it on that day? Ruyan froze for a moment after hearing this, then suddenly burst into tears. I don't know if she was crying because she had fallen from grace, or if she was crying because, in truth, none of this needed to happen. Fang Yuan was arrested for intentionally injuring someone and was sentenced to prison. Ruyan fell into a slump and announced her withdrawal from school. For a time, people couldn't stop gossiping. Netizens left comments one after another. Two great talents had fallen. Things were no longer the same. To be honest, the line between genius and madness is indeed razor thin. It's terrifying. What kind of mindset is it to not want your girlfriend to be stronger than you? Then an ID named "Today I'm cooking for my husband" posted a comment. Selfish love is truly terrifying. I looked speechlessly at Bai Ningbing, who was seriously posting a comment. "How old are you?" The other party covered her chest. "I just agreed to be someone's boyfriend, and now you're already starting to dislike me?" I was left speechless, laughing and crying at the same time. Let's talk properly. No more pretending to be pitiful. It had only been a week since I started being with Bai Ningbing, and he had already managed to make himself disliked by the whole company. The secretary came to ask her to review some documents. "President Bai, this is the new contract. How did you know these were the shoes He Kong bought for me?" It was simply so outrageous that it infuriated everyone. The woman across from me kept going on and on. It was annoying, but also sweet. The evening sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows and shone on her, drawing a halo around her. Suddenly, almost by instinct, I stepped forward and kissed her. Bai Ningbing was instantly frozen. After a long pause, she trembled and said, "Can I request another one?" I was about to lean in, when she suddenly squatted down into a horse stance. Looking straight at me, Bai Ningbing's position was perfectly aligned with my eyes. Finally, I smiled and kissed her. It was this woman in front of me who told me that everything you want is worth working hard to achieve. Only love doesn't need to be forced.